Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the knives that I've owned more than one of. There's a lot of different reasons that we, as knife nuts go back and purchase the same thing. Sometimes it's, out of regret for letting that model go. Sometimes there's a different variant that comes out. There's a lot of different reasons. And I had somebody request on a live stream one time, or at least ask me the question, what knives have you owned more than once? And I got to thinking about it, and I was like, wow, there are a lot. It was actually kind of hard to put this list together because thinking about all the money that I've spent on this stuff, but I figured you guys might be interested in this, and you guys seem to like these list videos, so that's what we're going to do today. Thanks so much for all of my to all of my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. Support means the world to me. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, there is a link down in the description. Let's go ahead and get started here with the first one. This is the Microtech Combat Troodon. You guys know, a lot of you who have been watching my channel, you know that I've got a Combat Troodon Hellhound right now that was a gift from my wife. My very first one was in 2014. It looked exactly like this. Anybody who has not handled I would say anybody who's not handled an OTF, they are, in my opinion, they're just as fun as I had always assumed. The first Microtech I ever owned was this Combat Troodon, and these things are huge. They fire hard. I loved it, and I ended up letting it go to purchase. It was one of my first Hinderers. I don't think it was the very first one, but I sold it and then bought a Hinderer. When I first picked this up, they were $385. I think I got a discount on it, but they're a lot more expensive now. I had missed it, not returned to it because of the high price tag, and then I lucked out with my wife picking up a Hellhound version of it. So yeah, I've owned two of these. Moving on here, the Lightning OTF. By the way, these are in no particular order except for the last one. The Lightning OTF, I've owned, I think, three of. The very first one that I owned, I lost it. In fact, speaking of OTFs, this is a good one to start with. You can pick these up at the Lightning OTF website and Grindworks, which, I think those are the only two places you can pick them up unless it's on the aftermarket. But a lot of these knives are going to have links down below, but that's where you can pick up this one. This is a great starter OTF, and I picked this up, I think after I picked up the Combat Troodon because I didn't want to use it. I didn't want to carry the Combat Troodon because of how much money I paid for it, so I picked this up, considering it was like a $35 OTF. I thought, yeah, I can beat on this thing. I ended up losing my first one, buying another one. Then I bought another variant of one, and then I actually bought multiple as gifts. So at least three for myself, and then multiple for other people. Definitely a great starter OTF. Moving on here, the Spyderco Mannix 2. I've actually owned three different Spyderco Mannix 2s. The very first one was a plain satin with G10 handles. Loved that one. Customized it and then sold it. The second one that I picked up was the all-black variant that I just wanted to kind of beat on, and I thought, well, if I get a DLC coating on it, I won't care about it as much because I don't like how the DLC coating looks as much. It's a weird mentality, but I just wanted a really, really good kind of beater. And I did. I used it. I ended up selling that version to a patron. And then I also picked up this DLT exclusive red G10 and 20CV variant, which I kept for a little bit and then ended up selling as well. This is an amazing knife. I will probably buy it again because that's, I know I'm going to catch some crap for this. Why do you keep going back and buying the same knife? I don't know. But I know I'm not the only knife nut who does this. So yeah, Mannix 2, fantastic knife. Moving on here, the Spyderco Shamon. I've owned two of these. My original, which I've actually still got, I thought it was right beside me. It's not. It must be in the knife case. And then I picked up this exact Blade HQ exclusive Jade and M4 blade. I can tell you this, it is not going to be the last time that I will buy a Shamon. This is a fantastic knife. I picked up the M4 blade assuming that I would hang on to it for a really long time. I just really liked the Jade and the M4, and then I ended up selling it. I did not, you guys can believe me if you want to or not, but I actually did not flip this and make money on it. I sold it for the exact same amount that I picked it up. I just thought, give somebody else a chance and I can break even on it. I got to kind of hold it and play with it. I didn't really use it or carry it or anything, but that's just what happened. Beautiful knife. I'm sure that I will pick up another Sprint as they continue to release. Moving on, the Spyderco PM2. I have owned two in G10 and S30V. The first one I customized and then sold it. The second one was this S110V and Blurple variant, which I also customized and then sold. And then I picked up another one, which is actually right here beside me. Those of you who know the sound of a PM2 by ear. I put some jade scales on it and a Flytanium backspacer, and it's a size comparison knife on this channel now, and I actually ended up removing the pocket clip on it here very recently because I basically just use it to open up packages, and it's an example knife. It doesn't really get carried. I love the PM2. I don't know that I will continue to buy more, but it's definitely one that I've loved enough to purchase more than once. Moving on here, the Spyderco Pair 3. We're getting a whole bunch of Spydercos out of the way. I promise there's other stuff on the list. I currently carry and use a Spyderco Pair 3. It's kind of the reason that I've let the PM2 or my love for the PM2 go. The Spyderco Pair 3 is one of, if not the very best carry EDC knife out there. I mean, in terms of not necessarily like, you know, my all-encompassing love for a knife design. No, it's just... it's very, very convenient. It's very, very pocketable. It's just friendly to manipulate. It's a fantastic tool. I prefer the G10 variant, and I prefer an MXG deep carry clip on these guys, but it's wonderful. It feels like a full-size knife, but it carries like a much smaller knife, and it's just very, it's very friendly to the hand. You know, it feels very organic to remove it from the pocket, get it out, use it, put it back without thinking about it. I currently own the Maximum version, and then I also picked up, not this exact one, but again, a Jade and M4 variant from Blade HQ. Mine was actually DLC coded. I think you can go back and watch that video. By the way, everything that's on this list, minus a couple, I have physical reviews of. So for those few of you who don't like my screen recorded episodes, that's totally fine. You can go watch videos of me physically handling most of these. Moving on here, of course, it had to be on the list, right? The Hinderer XM18. I have owned, to my knowledge, at least 17, yes, you heard me correct, 17 Hinderer XM18 models from Gen 3 all the way up to Gen 6. I have a huge problem. I am a gigantic Hinderer fan. I've got a playlist with almost 60 videos dedicated solely to Hinderer knives. I love them. The picture of the one you're seeing here was not mine exactly, but I had one almost exactly like it. I had a green and black layered G10 XM18 3.5-inch fatty Spanto. It was a Gen 4, and it was one of, if not my very favorite XM18s, and it was a user. I picked it up on the secondary market, really, really loved it. I still do this. I fully intend to buy more Hinderers, enjoy them for a while, sell them, and probably take a little bit of a loss, and then buy another one, and I'm going to keep doing it. And I know that people are going to comment down below and say, why would you do? Just buy the one you want. Well, the problem is that I keep finding the one that I want over and over again. I don't expect it to stop anytime soon. Moving on here, the XM24. That's unfair. You should have put it with the XM18. It's a different knife. Anybody who's handled the XM24 will tell you, yeah, it's a different knife. This is huge. These are gigantic, heavy, beastly knives. I have owned 3 of them. My very first XM24 was, I don't call it a Gen 4 because the XM24 is on a different generation than the XM18. The one I owned technically, I believe, was a Gen 2 or pre-Triway, and it was a Skinner, and it was in orange because it was the only XM24 available at the time. They were still fairly scarce. Loved it. Ended up kind of not loving the Skinner blade after a while. Sold it. Then found an XM24 Spanto in the secondary market in great condition that was a user. Picked that up and actually carried it for a while. Ended up selling that one. And then here very recently I picked myself up a brand new Triway, or as I'm pretty sure it's generation 3 for the XM24. Yeah, you really have to be a big Hinderer fan, I think, to really love them because they're kind of clunky and awkward. They're built insanely well, but not the most comfortable flippers in the world. They're just something about the aesthetics here. You know, it's a good looking knife. This is an XM24 Spear Point, which may or may not be coming to the channel at some point. Moving on here, the Benchmade Tilian. I've owned, to my knowledge, at least 5 full-size Benchmade Tilians, including the Doug Ritter variants, not the Ritter Hogue RSK MK1G2, but back when Doug Ritter had to deal with Benchmade and was actually making Benchmade Tilians with his own special blade, which is now being used on the Ritter Hogue variant. I think I've owned 1 Doug Ritter and 4 full-size Benchmade Tilians, varying from 154 CM to I think I had an S30V model. No, I had a 154 CM, And then I had 4 separate 20 CV variants. Why? Because they're so customizable. And this is, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. The Benchmade Grip Tilian has just as many, if not potentially more, aftermarket customizable parts than Hinderer knives. And Hinderer knives are known for being hyper modular and hyper customizable. Yeah, I love customizing Benchmade Grip Tilians. I do not like messing with the axis lock, messing with the T6 screws. I hate that, but there's a draw to them. There's so many amazing custom, like these are dark red micarta scales on this guy. Beautiful. If you Google, you know, custom Benchmade Grip Tilians, some of the most amazing aftermarket scale variants and pocket clip and hardware combinations, you know, and then on top of that, you can get, you know, the Benchmade Grip Tilian in Tanto and sheepsfoot, in drop point, in a multitude of different steels and coatings. Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, it's probably not the last time I'm gonna pick up a Grip Tilian, simply because I just like customizing them, right? And we don't have the same aftermarket for the Hogue Ritter right now as we do the Benchmade Grip Tilian. You'd think everything would fit in the same slots. They're a little bit different, so not yet. But anyways, moving on here, this was probably a confusing image to go to. This is the ZT0392. This particular one was the BLK. I've owned 2 of these, the BLK and the black green or BLK GRN. I've told this story many times. I had the black one, loved it. It was perfect, stupidly sold it, then missed it, decided to go after my dream variant, which was the black green, found one in seemingly perfect condition, was lied to on the Facebook, one of the Facebook groups. It had detent lash. It was in great shape, but it had detent lash. I specifically asked, does it rattle? Does the blade move around in the closed position? And he was like, no. And it did. In fact, it was the worst case of it that I'd ever had. So I have not given up on this knife, but sour taste in my mouth, definitely. I just, you know, you want it to be, if you ask somebody, hey, is it perfect? Like, you know, no knife nut's going to pick something up like this without knowing exactly what is and is not considered, you know, more or less perfect, or at least like new in box, right? Like new in box means like new in box, not like, it looks pretty new, but it's got a big gash on it, right? So anyways, that's what happened there. But I've owned 2 of these at least, and hopefully they're not my last. Anyways, moving on here, the ZT0562, you guys probably could have guessed. I have owned exactly, I've owned 3 of them. I did own the G10 variant, the carbon fiber variant, and the titanium variant. All 3 that are not special variants or sprint variants. I love this knife. This is still something that I consider to be one of the, just like the 0392, I consider it to be one of the very best folding knives out there, and alongside the XM18 now. Do I think it's better than the XM18? No, I think they're, you know, pretty close. I think the attention to detail on the Hinderer XM18 and just the final finish work and, you know, the fitment of everything is just a little bit better on the real deal. But I do love the ZT0562. And for anybody considering picking up a Hinderer, just you're not sure if you really want to spend that much money yet, the ZT0562 is certainly a good placeholder. I'm going to say I hope that your journey ends there so you don't spend any more money. But if you're like me, you inevitably will. You'll end up buying 3 0562s and 17 XM18s over a 5-year period. Anyways, moving on here to the ZT0909. I don't know why I like this knife so much. This did not take off well with a lot of people. It's G10 and a steel liner. It's based on the Les George Talos, right? Fully US made, just like all other ZTs, runs on bearings. It's a very simple construction, but still has that kind of overbuilt look to it, right? It's got the hex pivot, and it's got the big T8 or maybe even T10 body screws, big pillar standoffs. Very functional blade, but very heavy all the way around because big, thick stainless steel liners. This is a big, heavy-duty liner lock. I don't know why I liked it so much, but I did. It was very much overpriced when it first came out at like $180. Way too much money. S35VN. And then they just didn't really take off that well. And when they discontinued them, they dropped them down to 130, 135. I had picked one up when they initially came out at 180, and I loved it despite knowing it was overpriced. And then at the price of 130, 135, when they went discontinued, I couldn't say no to it, and I picked up another one. Both of them ended up being sold. I don't think that I'll pick this knife up again, but I will admit I have owned at least 2. Moving on here, of course, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people who have owned multiple 940s. They're collectible. People collect multiple variants. I've owned the 154 CM version, I think the OG version. The very first one I had was serrated, and I got it from a gold and silver shop here in town long time ago. Sold it. It was one of the first knives I ever sold when I got into the buying, selling, and trading with folding knives. And then down the road, I picked up an S30V variant from a local gun shop, and then sold that. And then I had the 940-2 for a little bit. And I have been very tempted many times to pick up a 940-1 and the new 940-2001 that was recently unboxed, perhaps yesterday. The 940 is a great knife. I think my overall love for it is gone. If there was one that I was going to pick up, it'd be that titanium variant, or I'd pick up a standard one just to put some custom titanium scales on, but I don't think that it's going to happen. But I've definitely owned it more than once. It's a great knife. Moving on here, the Benchmade Barrage. I'm kind of cheating here. My very first Benchmade ever. One of my very first, heavy quotes. You guys can't see my hands. High-end knives was the Benchmade Barrage. Mine was the hyper tactical, right? I was transitioning out of the weird, like, overly tactical, like, everything has to be black and tanto and serrated phase, like, many years ago, into the high-end knife world, and this was my hybrid, right? The first version of this that I owned was that exactly. Tanto, serrated, Benchmade Barrage. Loved it because it was assisted. It made me feel like this is the better version of what I'm used to. Ended up seeing a lot more stuff that looked more interesting on blade forums, and having conversations with people about assisted knives, and G10 versus the plastic or the acrylic or the FRN, right, versus titanium, some other stuff. Started learning about some better steels. Ended up selling it down the road, picked up this version, which is still the Barrage. It's a different model number, but it's got the aluminum bolster, G10 handles, and M390 blade. This was the first this is the first knife that I'd ever heard about M390 being on. This was the knife that got me interested in it. It wasn't my first M390 knife. That would have been my 0562, my OG, my original M390, not 204P, not 20CV, M390 0562. From Zero Tolerance. But anyways, at some point I did pick this up, and I count it. I've owned two of this. It's just a different variant of it. Moving on here, the Medford Marauder. I have owned two of these. My very first one was after my initial lusting after Medford knives, seeing the Praetorian Tie for the first time on Jim Skelton's channel. I was like, wow, they make knives at a 1/4 inch, thick stock on the blade, and they make the handle scales are 187 thousandths. Like, what a big beast of a knife, right? Well, the Marauder was nearly as out of reach to me as the Praetorian Tie, right? But it was less money, and it was actually something I could get my hands on because they were much more available at the time than the Praetorian Tie. So I saved up, sold a bunch of stuff that I had, that I wasn't using, and I finally got a hold of, at the time, my absolute dream knife, which you can still find on Google. If you type in Medford Marauder 3V Vulcan, there's a very terrible image of a gentleman holding a almost rainbow-colored Tanto Marauder in front of a window. There's some wood in the background. It's got the sort of light blue flame work done on the scales, and then the blade is a combination of red, yellow, and green. It was the most beautiful knife that I had ever owned. It was a $1,000 knife. Loved it, held on to it for a long time, ended up selling it, and then I missed it, so I picked up a standard D2 version off the secondary market, which was much less colorful, but I just wanted to experience the big brick, knife again. I don't know that I will pick up another Marauder, but it is certainly not the last time I'll pick up a Medford knife. I love Medford knives. Moving on here, the ZT0561, at the time meant to better mimic the XM24, right? The ZT0562, even though the 0562 came later, was, one that was, it was meant to mimic the XM18 in size and feeling, whereas the 0561 was more so meant to mimic the XM24. It wasn't quite as big as the XM24, but in any case, this was a beautiful knife, golf ball textured titanium, contouring, right? Had a very Hinderer-esque feel. I picked up the 0560, and what you're seeing here is actually the 0561, which is essentially the same thing with some sort of shadow fit and finish fixes, I think. I don't know the full story on these, but I had both of them at the same time at one point. Both purchased from the aftermarket because they're long since discontinued. Even when I picked them up, they were discontinued. Yeah, I own the black and the coyote one here, and I wish that I hadn't let them go. These are really, really cool knives, a little bit clunky, very thick behind the edge, not super usable, but certainly lighter than the actual XM24. Very much miss it. I might consider at some point picking up this knife again and just keeping it. Moving on here, the Kershaw Blur. Yes, I owned, before the Benchmade Barrage, when I was still in my hyper-tactical phase, much younger, had a Tanto serrated blur, black-coated, with the black Track-Tech inserts. Loved that knife, loved it, ended up losing it, and then I had actually a patron buy the exact same knife. After I was talking about it in a video, he bought the exact same knife and sent it to me, and he was just like, hey, I wanted to give this to you, just sort of as a gift to remind you of the nostalgia of owning that knife at one point, and I still have it. Wonderful, wonderful knife. Tantos aren't really my thing anymore, but I still love it. The Blur is an amazing knife, and I picked my wife up a Blur a while back, an S30V Blur, and I still think it's one of the better folding knife models out there. Moving on here, the very last one on the list, and I'm also kind of cheating here, the Praetorian Tie. The other version that I've owned is the Praetorian T, and I know that people want to jump on me and say, that's a different model. The only difference between the T and the Tie, other than the pocket clip and the style of hardware, right, is the thickness of the blade and the scales. If you're talking about full-size T, full-size Tie, they're the exact same length. Blade length and cutting edge are exactly the same. Handle cutting edge or handle length are exactly the same, right? The placement of the stops, the placement of the hardware, etc. It's all the same. It's just thicker, and the Praetorian has a special pocket, or the Praetorian Tie has a special pocket clip. I finally picked myself up a T once they came out with in my opinion, some more interesting steel. S90V through DLT trading on the T's. I picked one of those up, even though I knew good and well that S90V didn't make that much sense on the blade. I just really wanted it. And then once I handled it, I knew right then and there, I thought, I love this. I have to get a Tie. And so it was months later. In fact, might have been over a year later. I finally found a Praetorian Tie for what I considered to be a decent price. Most people are, probably already typing up their comments. How could you possibly spend that much money? I did, and you know what? I loved it enough that I probably would again. I love the Praetorian Tie. It is the only knife over $1,000 right now, brand new, that I would consider buying again. I don't think it's hyper practical. I do think it's incredibly durable, incredibly tough. It is certainly a thing to behold. I love this knife. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's episode. This was fun. It was just something that I, wanted to talk about. I thought you guys might enjoy listening. If you enjoyed this video or were entertained by it, or, are feeling positive for any reason about it, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.